I'll just tell you this, you guys, breaking away from emotional ties,
unhealthy emotional
ties is so hard. It is so hard. There was so much stress and anxiety for both of us. And I would say, I don't know, me particularly, I don't know, both of us, we talked about it daily, every single day for at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, where we were talking about how we were feeling and how much just inner turmoil we had. I started having panic attacks, which I'd never had before in my life. There was a couple times I was grocery shopping with my daughter and I almost passed out in the middle of the grocery store because of so much anxiety. There was one night I woke up Noble at like 2 a.m. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think I need to go to the hospital. And drove myself to the hospital because he had to stay here with Elena. And they hooked me up, did all the tests. They're like, no, you're fine. Are you under stress? And I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, so much emotional stress. And I came back and Noble was like, it just completely pissed off, honestly. Because it's like, look what this is doing to us. All this stress of trying to, end or even just put up boundaries in these relationships that just were not healthy anymore was causing massive amounts of stress. And we knew, okay, we can't do this. We've got to this has to change.
Welcome to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. Like most business owners, you already know you need good business and marketing strategies to scale and be profitable. But at some point, you've hit the dreaded wall where you feel stuck and frustrated. EQ for Entrepreneurs is for business owners and leaders who are honest enough to admit that they just might be the ones holding their business back and are brave enough to change that.
We're Noble and Kathy, and every week we're having candid conversations about all things emotional intelligence and how growing that has allowed us to get out of our own way and is radically transforming both our businesses and our personal lives. This is the secret sauce strategy for modern entrepreneurs who are tired of hustling without seeing results and want to grow a business and a life that they love.
What is going on, entrepreneurs, leaders, and influencers? We are super excited for this episode 99, why we blew it all up and started over at 45.
It's going to be a good one, y'all.
That's right. So thank you all for joining us. Some of y'all may be watching us on our YouTube channel, EQ for Entrepreneurs, or our podcast, EQ for Entrepreneurs as well. Thank you for sticking with us throughout this year. We had no idea that emotional health and emotional intelligence was going to be such an important and critical topic. Also, check this out. We are super excited to announce our next course on emotional intelligence. So if you're interested in taking a course on emotional intelligence, or your colleagues are, your company is, check out some details of that course at eqforentrepreneurs.com/EQA. And maybe your company or organization would like training on emotional health or emotional intelligence. Reach out to us, contact us, because we could set up a customized training for your organization, and we can make that happen. And we'd love to be a part of your emotional growth journey or your company's emotional growth journey as well. So this episode, we're going to be discussing how and why on earth would anyone cut out $90,000 from their income on purpose and intentionally, and why on earth would we start over at 45? Now, of course, we're probably being a little bit dramatic here. The reality is there are a lot of people who go through this. There are a lot of people who change careers. Anyone in the military who does 20 years starts over at, in their 40s. If they do, again, 20 plus years, they're going to start over in their 40s. And
this year, a lot of people had to, I think one of the biggest overused words in 2020, especially among entrepreneurs, has been the word pivot.
Right, sure.
Right? Oh, we have to pivot. How are you going to pivot? But and as annoying as it is, right, to have heard that word over and over again, the reality is so many people were put in a position where they had to just figure stuff out, where they were either starting at ground zero or they were having to start something completely new, change how they were doing it, relook at things completely differently. And so we wanted to just share our story today of, now we made this decision not because of the pandemic. There were other reasons for us why we made the decisions that we did. And we're going to go into those because it was a series of really big decisions that we made, of really, really big ones. And they've had consequences. Of course, every decision has consequences in our life. And we just want to talk about them with you guys. We want to share them because our emotional intelligence growth journey and our emotional healing journey has been at the forefront of all the changes that we've made. And I can just tell you that these changes have been life-changing, have been life-giving. It's been quite a journey, and we know that a lot of you are going through them as well. And so I just know that when you hear somebody else's story, it gives you confidence that you can do it too. And maybe a little bit of a roadmap of, okay, here's how to kind of think about this a little bit differently.
And a couple things. One, it's great to have Mama Sita on.
I know. It's been a hot minute since I've been on the podcast. And we'll talk about a little bit about what happened and why I kind of fell off the face of the earth in terms of being on the podcast. We'll talk about that a little bit either in this episode or next episode where we celebrate 100 episodes of the podcast. What? But it's good to be back.
Yes. And speaking of the next episode, we're going to be covering our lessons learned from 100 episodes on emotional growth, emotional health, and emotional intelligence. So it's going to be fun. And, we'll get a lot, just sharing some of our top, lessons learned from this past year of 100 episodes. And, okay, another thing I want to share is I just want to applaud you all for those of you all that are watching, listening, and beginning your journey, or even in the middle of your journey, wherever you're at. But I'm just proud of you for taking ownership and really making this emotional growth journey your own, because it has to be. There's no other way to do it. She can't grow for me. I can't grow for her. So I'm just proud of you for taking ownership, and realize our journey started from 2 negative experiences. Yeah. So a lot of times we say this, the silver lining. So man, it's so true. In the middle of these 2 negative experiences, I never would have said, oh man, we're going to have a business out of these 2 negative experiences. But that's the beautiful thing. God doesn't waste anything. He's the ultimate recycler. He does not waste anything. So even our dumb decisions, our low EQs, our maybe potentially missed opportunities, thankfully, God is not done with us. And he turned a couple of negative experiences into what now is a new business for us, and is and has helped out a lot of people in the process. So again, I want to thank you all, because we're just shy of 22,000 downloads in basically 11 months of podcasting. And again, thank you all so much for your support, your feedback, rating, reviewing, subscribing, sharing the different episodes that have been valuable to you. Just thank you again. It's been a blessing to be a part of and come alongside you all in your own emotional growth journey while we're sharing our lessons learned throughout our own emotional growth journey. So
let me just start just real quickly with the definition of what we mean when we say blow it all up, right? What that comes from a book actually that I listened to on Audible by Jennifer Fulwiler. It's called Your Blue Flame. And in the book, her husband is talking about a decision that he had made where he essentially blew it all up, and meaning that he was willing to look at everything in his life and shake it up all the way down to the foundation if necessary, so that they could be truly living the life that they wanted to live, so that they could live a life that was in congruence with their values and not leaving anything unscrutinized, letting everything be up for almost everything. Obviously, there were some very core foundational values that they had that were not up for negotiation. But everything else was up for negotiation and was up for scrutiny and up for saying, is this really how we want to live now? And if it's not, to change it, like to make a radical change with it. And when I was listening to this audio, I was like, that's exactly what we did. We didn't realize that's what we were doing, but that's what we did. We had reached a place in our life. See, we got started in business very young. It was in our first year of marriage. We were probably 23 years old. We got started in a network marketing business, and we loved it. It was great. It was such a great place for us to learn about ourselves, to learn about other people. Well, sort of learn about ourselves in a little bit. We'll get to that in a minute.
Get on personal growth.
Yeah, we started a whole personal growth and development journey. We learned leadership, and we started developing a network. And guess what? By the time I was 27 and he was 30, that business was very successful to the point that neither of us had to have jobs anymore. So we were full-time entrepreneurs, full-time business owners. We were living the dream, right? The quote unquote dream that we had, that a lot of people have, of being able to leave a 9-to-5 job and be a full-time business owner. Family time, we had tons of family time. And then by the time our daughter was born a couple years later, like she's never had parents that have had to leave her and go to jobs. Like we just have always been able to be a full-time family. We love the people that we got to work with. We had incredible experiences of being able to speak across the country and even around the world. We've had audios, go out across the world, literally, and just incredible experiences that we are very, very thankful for. And the thing that kind of how our whole growth journey happened was a couple of years ago, a couple things happened that got us started on our emotional healing journey. Do you want to talk about those? Or
so I'll share. So this is going to be, I'm working on a book right now of all my lessons learned of emotional growth. Let me share some of the consequences of stuffing and avoiding my feelings and emotions for 4 decades. So again, this is all part of the story of how we got to start our this whole podcast and our business and stuff like that on emotional health and emotional intelligence. So what does 4 decades of pain and bitterness and emotional injury and emotional injuries that have been stuffed and avoided, what does it look like? 4 decades of emotional injury stacked in the vault or basement of my being.
And can I just, before you start this, understand this. We had spent a ton of time over the course of 2 decades on personal growth and development.
Hundreds, thousands of hours, hundreds or thousands of books.
Yes, books. We've gone to conferences. We've had one-on-one mentorship working on our personal growth and development. And the thing that we got to do a podcast episode on this.
Yeah.
There is a difference between personal growth and development and emotional intelligence.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. Because even after all of that, we still found ourselves in this place where we could not outgrow our lack of emotional intelligence. We could not outgrow the emotional injuries that we had, the emotional dysfunctions that we had.
Yeah, no amount of John Maxwell leadership books is going to grow your emotional intelligence.
There you go.
Just think about that for a second. No amount of John Maxwell leadership books or whoever your favorite author is, Patrick Lencioni, Tony Robbins, fill in the blank. If no amount of Brendan Bouchard, no amount of those books and conferences and seminars and courses will grow you into a more emotionally mature, emotionally healthy individual.
Except for our course, because that's what we teach you exactly. It's exactly what we teach you.
But again, to Kathy's point, just that there's a difference. There's a difference between personal growth and development or your leadership and emotional growth and development. And again, you can't outgrow, you will never outgrow your emotional intelligence. You'll never, it will always catch up to you. Your EQ, your emotional health and intelligence, will be absolutely a limiting factor, a potential limiting factor in whatever you're trying to accomplish in your life if you do not make intentional time and space to grow your emotional health. And just very quickly too, for some of y'all that may be checking this out for the first time, emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence has 4 main domains. Now, there are different camps and theories, and some have, there's 9 different intelligences and there's 7 different. We're just going to talk from a basic, kind of accepted industry standard of 4 main primary domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. Those are kind of the 4 main domains. And also, the whole purpose of this stuff is not to just be warm, fuzzy, kumbaya, and being controlled and mastered by your feelings and emotions. It's actually the opposite. It's so that we're not controlled and ruled by our emotions and feelings, but rather we're informed by our emotions and feelings and others' emotions and feelings, but we're not controlled by ours or others' feelings and emotions. And we can take this important, critical human data called feelings and emotions and use that information to make the most effective, most productive decisions, not only for your life, but for those people that are important in your life, your company, your business, etc.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of lay a little bit of that foundation, because you're not hearing from 2 people who hadn't really accomplished much in their life. You're hearing from 2 people who had reached I think we figured out it was the top 0.04, right, percent of this company at a very young age. And who have done a lot of personal growth development.
Yeah, we were in the top 3,000 businesses out of 700,000 businesses, 700 or 800,000 businesses. Yeah. Whatever that number's, all you Rain Men out there can figure out the math really quickly, whatever that math is.
So it's not like we weren't successful in life. It's not like we hadn't accomplished things. We had, and we still had other work that we had to do. And so anyways, I just wanted to say that before we get to this list.
Well, okay, so now kind of jump into this. So again, some things that contributed to this whole journey of emotional growth and development. What does 4 decades of pain and bitterness that I just kicked down the road, stuffed in the basement, and again, initially it was fine as a cute furry little monkey, but the longer and the more emotional injuries that I had built up and stuffed and avoided, eventually that little furry monkey was now an 800-pound gorilla that I could not control anymore, and became King Kong, or sometimes I call it the Incredible Hulk, and just leaves a lot of damage, kind of in the wake. So here is what it looks like for stuffing and avoiding for 4 decades. I started yelling at my wife. I yelled at my, at the time, 11-year-old daughter once. I was compulsively late, constantly overate, completely addicted to food, because food was my coping mechanism. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was. I ballooned to 281 pounds. I couldn't focus. I was forgetful. I was disorganized. I started but never finished books and projects. I was emotionally unavailable. I wasn't emotionally present. I was completely out of emotional control when triggered. I would get triggered often and intensely. I would withdraw emotionally 3 days to an entire week every time I got triggered. I would immediately cut someone out of my life if I felt injured by them. I would avoid conflict at all costs. I would never talk about, handle, or deal with money. I was depressed, suicidal, functionally dysfunctional. I had no boundaries, didn't even know what boundaries were. I self-sabotaged. I was self-condemning. I hated myself. I didn't believe in myself. I had no confidence. I was emotionally codependent on people and organizations. I was emotionally needy. I was a people pleaser addict. I had very few likes or dislikes. I had little to no self-awareness. I had little to no self-management. I didn't write a book. I didn't start a podcast. I didn't pursue most of my dreams. I used unbridled positivity as a coping mechanism to avoid feeling unpleasant emotions. And I am sure the list could go on, but that was a fairly thorough list of some of the consequences of stuffing and avoiding my emotions. And here's another huge point that I try to make in about every podcast episode I do. Unaddressed emotional issues do not get better over time. In fact, the opposite, unaddressed emotional issues get worse over time.
They compound.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are some reasons why we ended up, starting this whole journey. Another one, two other instances, we got exposed to a toxic leader that used a lot of control and manipulation, and we were on the receiving end, and a lot of other people were on the receiving end. And again, at the time, that was not a pleasant experience to be in the receiving end, and seeing this guy kind of leave a wake of emotionally injured people. And the second experience was, again, I had yelled at my wife 3 or 4 times in the span of a month. And she said, dude, 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Number 2, you've never done that before, which means number 3, something is wrong with you. And so, boom, we went to counseling. We had marriage issues, all kinds of stuff. We went to counseling, and our counselor introduced me to 2 revolutionary concepts. Get ready, drum roll.
Drum roll.
You probably have never heard of these things before. Feelings and emotions, y'all. That's a true story. And those are all the things that kind of led up to us, again, not realizing that all this negative turning into a positive, starting our emotional growth journey, and us wanting to, once we started this emotional growth journey, it led to some really amazing, life-changing things.
Yeah, it was crazy. We started, as we started this emotional growth journey, learning about emotional intelligence, we started realizing there are areas in our life that are not healthy, right? We started to just see it in different places. We started to see it in ourselves, in our relationship, even in our parenting, and we started to see it around us as well, right? In our relationship with other people, in how other people were operating and doing things, and in organizations that we were a part of. And, it's not like there's any expectation or that it's even realistic that we're ever going to live in a perfect world, right? As long as you're surrounded by people, there's going to be issues because everybody has baggage and things that they're working on, and all of that's fine. However, what we started to realize is we have to create some boundaries, because we had been operating with no boundaries for so long, because we thought that that's how you were supposed to do it. You're supposed to be infinitely available, and that was good leadership. We thought that was how you really mentor people, is by getting all up in their business, and they're getting all up in your business. And there was just no boundaries. And we started to realize, okay, even though we know that there's going to be other people who have stuff that they're working on, we can control how much we let that affect us. And so we realized, okay, we have to start not only healing ourselves, but we also have to start protecting ourselves from other people's issues, right? From other people's, things that they're doing. And so we started putting up boundaries. And let me tell you, that's not a popular thing to do. As soon as you start putting up boundaries just for, and boundaries aren't to punish other people. Boundaries are just to protect you. That's
and
it.
Others.
And to protect others from you, right? So it's to protect yourself and to protect others. But what happens is the people who were benefiting the most from you not having boundaries will dislike it the most when you start having boundaries.
Well, and especially if in those relationships where you start putting up boundaries, if you never had them before, it
It changes everything.
Surprise,
yes.
surprise, but it's going to grind some gears. If your relationships have been characterized by a lack of boundaries, and listen, including with any mentors you have. We didn't have any boundaries with our mentors either, because we had, and this is all totally our fault, we put them on pedestals, and I would even say, well, there's no doubt we became codependent on them, emotionally codependent on them, and so put them on pedestals and idolize them and stuff, and which is 100% our fault. And so when you with all these different relationships that you didn't have boundaries in, listen, there's going to be some tension when you start to implement boundaries, because there've never been boundaries before. So that, maybe they've been used to, and I'm just using this as an example, I'm not saying this has actually happened, but maybe what has happened in the past is folks could just walk into your house without knocking, right? Just as an example. And all of a sudden, you lock the door now. And when they come in and hit the head on the door. Hey, why is the door locked? I can just walk into your house. What's up with that? Knock on the door. Dude, no, what's up, man? Why are you, if I want to come in, I want to come in. Hey, man, you know what? You are absolutely right that's how I've rolled for the past, however many years. But now I'm going to go ahead and start locking my door.
And you need to text if you want to come over. You can't just come over at any time.
Right. Schedule a time or, whatever. And as long as it's convenient for me and you, so it's a win-win, not just, hey, if you want to meet me at 2 a.m., oh, yes, boss, I'll be available at 2 a.m. No, I'm not available at 2 a.m. I'm doing stuff. I'm asleep, whatever. That's not good for me. How about this time, right? So, and before, I would just, anytime, any place, any whatever, I would just be completely yes, boss, 3 bags full. And anyway, but the point is, when you start to develop boundaries in relationships, there will be tension. So emotionally prepare yourself for that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's to be expected. Again, if you've been used to driving a certain way and all of a sudden that the road is blocked that day, it's annoying. I get annoyed. I've always been going this way to my jiu-jitsu class, the road's blocked. Well, man, now it's going to affect my time, right? So I get annoyed for that new boundary that I didn't know was going to be there. So anyway, just realize that's a natural part of the journey when you start to establish boundaries, and realize too, as you get emotionally healthier, you will consciously and subconsciously begin creating boundaries, which is a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing.
And as you do your emotional growth journey, you're going to start to see, like we had talked about, you're going to start to see other areas where other people are unhealthy, or even where other cultures, and I don't mean it could be a country's culture or people group culture, but even organizational cultures, maybe the place that you work at, maybe the church you go to, I don't know. You're going to start to see, man, there's some unhealthy things here. And you have a decision to make. And this is the place that we got to is, wow, there are some unhealthy things there. No wonder we fell into this. No wonder we got these mindsets. No wonder we had no boundaries, right? There were some things that were part of the culture that were just unhealthy. And you have a decision that you have to make. It's, am I going to stay and try to change this culture? Or do I need to separate myself? Do we need to bounce? Do we need to go? Do we need to create a boundary here? Or something in between? What does it need to look like? And realize you do have to make a decision about that. Because if you don't make a decision, that's deciding to stay. That's saying, okay, I recognize that this is unhealthy, but I'm going to choose to stay. Or you could choose to stay and take it on and try to change it. And I'll just tell you this, that you've got to be very careful with that, because it can be very easy to cross the line of unhealthy responsibility, taking responsibility for things that are not yours to take responsibility for, right? Maybe if it's not your organization, it might not be your responsibility to change it. And you could also be setting yourself up for a lot of pain and hard work. Have you ever tried to change something or change somebody who doesn't want to change and who doesn't even think that they need to change, right? Talk about a frustrating you know, a frustrating task that you'll never, it will suck the life out of you trying to get somebody to change who doesn't want to change and doesn't even think that they need to change. And so, you know, for us, we really had to just look at those things and weigh these things and say, okay, so now that we are getting ourselves emotionally healthy, we're starting to see these things around us. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do?
And what's in our boundary and what's not in our boundary. Yeah. Because like Kelly said, not only may it not be your responsibility, but it may be outside your boundaries. Again, if you don't own that house, right, you only can control what's in your house. If it's outside of your house, that's not in your boundary, and therefore it's not your responsibility to change. Now, if out of the goodness of your heart, you want to help out or whatever, do what you can do, just realize just realize what you're doing and realize that it's not your responsibility or your potential company or organization. And so just be careful about putting yourself in an unhealthy scenario. Just be aware of that, because that can lead to some unhealthy experiences and relationships if you start trying to change things that are not your responsibility to change. And here's the other thing too. Even if, because this happened to us, even if, they request you to help change, they ask you, hey, or even, even use maybe some disappointment and guilt on you to, hey, man, I can't believe, like, man, why that you would not want to, be a contributing member to change the culture or whatever. And, again, thankfully, because of our emotional healing and stuff, I don't, leadership through guilt and disappointment does not affect me or impact me anymore. And no, that's not my responsibility to change it. If you're a founding member of that organization, or that's your company, that's for you to fix. So anyway, just be aware, because think about this. This is a great, powerful thing to do. How much of the stress and anxiety that you have on a daily or weekly basis that are around things that you cannot control, that are not part of your responsibility, they're outside of your boundaries. So if you had to list all the things that cause you stress and anxiety, that's a great exercise to do. What percentage of those things are actually in your boundaries? What percentage of those things are actually outside your boundaries or outside your responsibility? And realize all those things outside your responsibility, really work on being intentional to let those things go, because those are not yours to carry. So anyway, those are some other things, to think about in this journey here.
So we started asking ourselves some new questions. And for anybody, if you are at a place that you are having to face a change, whether it's a change that you are choosing like we did, or something that's being chosen for you or forced upon you, we started to ask some new questions. And what we started to realize is there were so many things that we were still doing that were based off of some unhealthy things. They were either based off of dreams that we had 20 years ago, and we just had never reevaluated them. We're just continuing to operate in them because that was just easy to just keep going. Or it was based off of people pleasing, right? But let's do these things because this is what everybody expects of us and this is what they want from us. Or they were based off of
expectations.
Just expectations. Yeah, the expectations that other people had of us and that we had of ourselves, and just never reevaluated and reassessed. Is this what we still want? Is this still good for us? Is this still a smart way to do things, right? Over the decades, so much has changed, but we realized there's so much that hadn't changed with us. And so we started opening up possibilities that we hadn't opened up in a long time, and really just asking ourselves, like we talked about with the blow it all up, looked at every area of our life and asked a couple questions. Are we doing this from a healthy perspective? Are we doing this from a healthy place? Or are we still doing this because of some emotional unhealthiness, because of people pleasing or fear of abandonment, or trying to keep these relationships status quo? Is this really what we want? And what we found was that the answer to a lot of those things was no. And can I just tell you, that was so scary. Like, it was so scary to realize, oh my gosh, no. So many of these things that we are either doing in our life or keeping in our life, we don't even really want anymore. It's not making us happy. It's not healthy. And so we had to start saying, okay, well, what do we want? And so again, this whole emotional growth journey, we had to start healing the things in us that were keeping us stuck in maybe unhealthy things or dysfunction. And then we also had to start figuring out, what do we want, right? What do we want this to look like? What do we want our life to look like? And I'll just tell you this, you guys, breaking away from emotional ties,
unhealthy emotional ties
is so hard. It is so hard. There was so much stress and anxiety for both of us. And I would say, I don't know, me particularly, I don't know, both of us, we talked about it daily, every single day for at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, where we were talking about how we were feeling and how much just inner turmoil we had. I started having panic attacks, which I'd never had before in my life. There was a couple times I was grocery shopping with my daughter and I almost passed out in the middle of the grocery store because of so much anxiety. There was one night I woke up, Noble, at like 2 a.m. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think I need to go to the hospital. And drove myself to the hospital because he had to stay here with Elena. And they hooked me up, did all the tests. They're like, no, you're fine. Are you under stress? And I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, so much emotional stress. And I came back and Noble was like, it just completely pissed off, honestly, because it's like, look what this is doing to us. All this stress of trying to, end or even just put up boundaries in these relationships that just were not healthy anymore was causing massive amounts of stress. And we knew, okay, we can't do this. We've got to this has to change.
Yeah. And just the emotional consequences, the emotional consequences of some of the relationships and environments that you may be living in. You may have learned how to function with the dysfunction, but really that's another powerful thing about becoming more self-aware and thus more emotionally intelligent. You may learn to discover, like we did, wow, it has taken 2 years of intentional daily emotional work to work through these these feelings and emotions and stuff. We need, like, this is crazy, this is nuts, like this is real stuff. And it was, for a while, it was all consuming.
Yeah.
Have you all ever been all consumed by a particular emotion or a feeling? Right? It's
exhausting.
It's exhausting. So that's why it's so important not to stew, but to work through it. And again, if you've listened to some of our previous, podcast episodes, we give a lot of tools. And of course, our course, we talk about the tools on how to intentionally work through your emotional issues and not just stew or stuff, but work through. The only way to emotional freedom is through emotional issues. The only way to emotional freedom is through emotional issues. And so we had to be very intentional at working through, again, some of these unhealthy emotional relationships and environments that we had been a part of. And the blessing is that the healthier emotionally we became, the more at peace we became with our new ever expanding boundaries. But again, it took time. That was not, it was not overnight. And like Kathy had said a number of times, there were consequences. There were consequences for us beginning to put out our boundaries and stuff. And here's another perfect example of boundaries. Our daughter, she's 13 now. And one thing that, man, for the last handful of years, I have been really, really hyper aware of is her boundaries. I want to make sure as a father, as her dad, that I am aware of, I recognize and affirm her ever expanding boundaries as a now young adult, as a teenager, as she's transitioning into adulthood and womanhood. I want to set an example of how I want every man that she ever comes across to respect her boundaries the way her dad does. And if some man doesn't, she will know this is not a healthy environment, this is not a healthy relationship, and I'm out. Or she deals with it however, appropriately she needs to deal with it. But boundaries is huge, huge part of not only your own emotional growth journey, but again, why we burned it all, blew it all up and stuff. And here's the thing too. So much so, we developed our boundaries so much so that we intentionally left $90,000. We walked away from 90 grand because of our ever growing boundaries. We valued emotional freedom over financial freedom because, in my opinion, financial freedom without emotional freedom is not freedom. You are still potentially an emotional slave, even though you're financially independent or you have millions or whatever the case is. And for me, now that we've been financially independent, and I've been an emotional slave. Listen, I value emotional freedom. Not that I don't value financial freedom. Finances is very important, but definitely not at the expense of my emotional freedom. If someone said, "No, I'll pay you $10 million right now to be my emotional slave," not a chance, bro. Not $100 million. Not bill. You know what I mean? So just realize, that boundaries is a very natural consequence of beginning and continuing your emotional growth journey.
So I've got a little list here of 6 big decisions that we made and just kind of what that's looked like for us. So just to kind of paint a little bit more of a picture of when we talk about blowing it all up, kind of what that has looked like practically. So big decision number 1, we moved across the country. We sold our house, we sold one of our vehicles, we sold half of our belongings, and we moved. And for some of you that you might be thinking, well, that's not a very big deal. People do that all the time. Yes, people do that all the time, but it was a big deal for a couple reasons. Number one, we had lived in North Carolina for 23 years, right? The first 5 we were there because of the military, because Noah was stationed at Fort Bragg. And the rest of it was because we felt like we needed to be around this organization and this group of people, that our success was tied to them and to those relationships. And we could look back and say, yeah, it worked out great for us, right? Because we did achieve financial success and we did build a great business. But that initial decision that we made at the beginning, it got deeper and deeper, and it got to the point where we didn't think that we could make it in our life without these people now. Do you see how it turned unhealthy? Where at first we're like, no, there's something here for us. It turned out to be, no, we can't live without this. And we can't live without, being here, physically being here. And once we started to get emotionally healthier, we realized, oh my goodness, this is not how adults operate. Like, adults should not be operating this way. We should be living as adults and making decisions as adults. And yeah, it's fine to get feedback, but ultimately we have to make our own decisions. And so we had come out to Colorado on a homeschool visit with a homeschool organization, and we fell in love. And we started thinking, man, we'd really love to live there. We would really love to live there. It's our dream spot. right? It's the dream life. We love the weather. We love the mountains. We love skiing and snowboarding and all the things we get to do out here. But the first thought that came to mind is, oh, we can't do that. And then we're like, why are we thinking we're grown adults? We built a business so that we could have freedom in our life and be able to make these decisions. And now we felt like we couldn't even do that. We thought that's messed up. Because we were getting emotionally healthy, we started to realize that's not even healthy to think like that. And so we started giving ourselves permission to say, well, what if we did? What if we did move and live someplace that we love? Our daughter was at the time in 6th grade, and we realized we've only got 5, 6, or 7 years left with her in the home before she graduates and goes on to live the life that she's going to live. How do we want to live these years? Like, what do we want this to look like? And we started dreaming new dreams and just looking at things from a very different perspective.
And realize, so the state that we were in that prevented us from making healthy emotional decisions because we were unhealthy emotionally. We were still emotionally needy. So we felt like we had to get permission, and some call it perspective. There's a biblical principle called the counsel of many advisors, but I would argue that those many advisors are many advisors, not all in the same deal, that all think the same. I think there's value in getting counsel from people that have different perspectives, maybe not different values, but different perspectives, not in one group that all think the same way, but have different perspectives. And so once we realized, again, I'm a smart guy. I know how to think. I've learned how to think. We're getting perspective from other different counselors and advisors and stuff. And this is a decision that financially we were able to make, and all that kind of stuff. We can make it. And remember that big giant list I read off? I was, thankfully, because we were already on an emotional growth journey, I was not operating under those same emotional unhealthiness, that same emotional unhealthiness that I was before. So I was able to make the decision, and man, I'm so thankful. It's been 1.5 years now since we've moved. And my only regret is that we didn't do it sooner, but whatever, it is what it is. I'm just thankful that we moved when we did. And here's another thing too. If you do make decisions like that, what are the consequences? Are there consequences from your advisors, from your counselors, from your mentors or coaches? And if there are consequences, I'd really evaluate why. Why are there some why would there be consequences, or what would those consequences be? Now, obviously, please understand, I'm not advocating, make decisions in a vacuum, make decisions without thoughtful decision making and proper thinking and weighing out the pros and cons. No, of course, do all that stuff. But the other thing is just realize, if you are growing your emotional health and emotional intelligence, you have what it takes to make decisions on your own. You can think for yourself. That's one of the challenges, man, is that there's so many people that thinking is hard. It's hard to think for yourself. It's really hard to think for yourself if you're not emotionally healthy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let all my counselors and advisors think for me. Tell me what I should do, boss man. Tell me what I should do, coach man, Mr. Mentor man. I don't care how much money they have. They're not your family. They're not you. And listen, when I'm a Christian, so when you stand before God, they're not going to ask, hey, hey, coach or mentor number 1 or 2 or 3, why did Noble make those decisions? No, he's going to look at me. Noble, why did you make those decisions? Well, it's because I counseled and they told me. Dude, no, it's me. It's my decision, right? It's my responsibility. I need to take ownership. So take ownership not only of your thinking, but of your emotional growth as well. They're equally important, and they both affect each other. There's a book I'm reading right now. It talks about it's impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. It's impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally mature. And I would also throw in there, it's impossible to think clearly or to have a healthy thought process while remaining emotionally immature. They're tied, man. The emotional journey is so tied with each other. That book, by the way, is called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzaro. So one other thing here. So our boundaries, our boundaries began to grow. We were getting better at realizing, this is a huge point, at realizing what we were willing to deal with and put up with and what we are not willing to deal with and put up with. Even again, at the expense of many relationships and up to and including $90,000 of compensation. We valued our own calling, purpose, and boundaries, and being more than continuing to remain in some relationships or situations that we did not feel were emotionally healthy, or that had an emotional environment that we wanted to be a part of or be around. I'll say it that way.
So big decision number 2 was we allowed ourselves freedom to change and dream new dreams. And that sounds simple. Of course, everybody's doing it, right? It's the new year. Everybody's dreaming new dreams. But for us, this felt very difficult to do because we felt like, or I'll speak for me, we felt like we were quitting. Right? So do you see that difference? Do you see the difference between having the freedom to dream new dreams and to start something new versus being looked at and therefore looking at yourself like you're quitting? And because we had for so long been taught and been in the mindset of you never quit, you never quit, you never quit. Quitters are losers, right? Don't quit on your dreams, don't quit on all this stuff. That we never even gave ourselves the ability to say, well, what if we do need to change something so that we can accomplish our dreams? What if we need to change something so that we can actually live a life that's a dream life to us now? It's like we had to give ourselves permission to say, okay, we're in our mid-40s now. We're not in our early 20s. We have a family. Things are very different for us. We had to give ourselves permission to let the dream look different, to say, no, okay, those were wonderful, but we've changed. And so the dream can change as well. And it doesn't make you a quitter. It doesn't make you a loser. Even though there might be some people who will think that, that's okay. Again, like Noble said, they're not living our life. We're living our life. And so we got to start to dream fresh dreams about what we want our life to look like and how we want to live it.
And what if God called you to do something different?
Well, which he did.
What if God called you to do something different? And again, I'm not going to preach to you, but just go back and look in the Bible. If did David have different? Did he do different career things? Absolutely. Start out as a shepherd, and then boom, transition into being a king. Every single one of the disciples, they were doing something before they were a disciple of Jesus. Big Ranger Moses grew up in the palace, killed somebody, murdered an Egyptian, which was not popular in Egypt, especially coming from the palace, from the Egyptian White House, so to speak, and goes off into hiding for 40 years as a shepherd. Different things. Big Joseph, look at his life. Did he have different times where he was doing different things? Absolutely. So, don't put God in a box and say, God, I know this is what you want me to do. Listen, that's dangerous, because God can do whatever the heck he wants to do. And maybe for that season, he wants you to do whatever it is that you're doing. But, again, because here's what happens. If you say that to yourself, I know this is what God wants me to do from now until kingdom come, what you have the possibility of doing is closing yourself off to whatever God has for you next, or even the next level. Maybe he's calling you to a next level that may not be in the same thing that you've been doing at that particular time. So just be careful.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Here's what's crazy. So I had started journaling regularly, especially in my quiet time, when I was having quiet time with God and hearing from him. And here's what was so crazy is over and over, I can look back now and I can read back through. God was saying, no, Kathy, this is what I have for you. I'm the one moving you. I'm the one taking you to Colorado. I'm the one giving you new dreams. I'm the one moving you forward, moving you out, moving you into something new. And even though it was God telling me that, I was still so afraid because it wasn't coming from these people. And it was different than what we thought was right. It was different than what we thought we were supposed to do, than what we thought we were going to do for the rest of our lives. And so it was very hard for me to say, okay, this is coming from God, so I need to change. Like, even just saying that, it sounds ridiculous, but it was very, very difficult because that's what we had been so used to. We've been so used to this one thing and we didn't want to be quitters, even though it's God saying, no, you're not quitting. It's me. I'm moving you into the new thing. I'm doing something new here. It's not we just had to look at it very differently.
We trusted people's voice over God's voice.
Ooh, yeah.
We trusted people's voice over God's voice. We took that verse, the counsel of many advisors is wise, and that became our gospel, even more than the gospel, even more than what does God say? What is God saying? And well, I'm not gonna. There's a lot more I could expound on. Okay, the other thing too. So this is another reason why we blew it all up and started over. Our emotional, so now that I was no longer addicted to people pleasing or having to get permission or perspective to make decisions, I had a new emotional freedom. And again, not that I still have counselors and advisors that we talk to. So it's not like I'm no longer embracing that biblical principle, because I believe that's a biblical principle. I still am following that, but now I have freedom to choose my support system and my counselors and advisors, if you will, my mentors. And our emotional growth journey was impacting every single area of our lives. And I'm not exaggerating. My faith changed. Our marriage changed and is changing. Our parenting is changing and growing and improving. Our finances are growing, changing, and improving. Our health and fitness is growing and changing and improving. Our businesses are growing, changing, and improving. Our relationships are healthier. I'm thinking with more clarity. All those issues. I'm more organized. I've been on time more in the last 2 or 3 years than I was in the previous 30 years. No exaggeration. There's so I'm finishing more books. I'm finishing more projects. Like, all that list that I had before is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because I'm getting more and more emotionally healthy.
Yep. Okay, let me finish this list here of our big decisions. Big decision number 3, we've already kind of talked about. It was ending some long-term partnerships and walking away from $90,000 a year. And we haven't ended all the partnerships that we've had, but we've ended some of them. And people think we're crazy. They do. They think we're crazy. But we, like Noble said, there were just certain things that were out of alignment with the values that we now have. Not all of them. There's so many things that were in alignment, but it just wasn't in alignment with the emotional growth and the health that we were wanting in our life. And so we chose to walk away. Big decision number 4, we started a new business, right? You're listening to it, EQ for Entrepreneurs, and we're going to give you an update of that in the next episode. So I'm not going to talk much about that. Big decision number 5, we chose to walk away from some unhealthy relationships. We've been talking about that as well. We had to take some people off of pedestals, and we had to let some people go. There were some people who they walked away from us because They didn't like us creating boundaries and setting that. And we had to be okay with that, right? Because that's their decision. And we have to let them make the decisions that they want to make as well. And then big decision number 6, we had to face our fears of starting over and of creating a new future. And can I just say this again, if you are at a place where you're facing some change, where you might have to blow it all up yourself, or you've had things all blown up over this past year, the thing you're probably going to, even though this was something that we chose, we still went through a lot of the steps of the grieving process, right? We still went through it: denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, depression, and then finally to acceptance. And I just want to encourage you with this thought. This was something that when I was starting to kind of come up out of all of it, right? Come up out of the out of living in the emotional quagmire that I had been in, making these changes, was this thought here: what does this now make possible for me? What does this new decision, this new life, what does this change now make possible? Because when you get to that point, when you can get to the point where you start seeing possibility, everything opens up. Because for so long, all we saw was what we were losing, was what was changing, was the emotions that we were feeling about the changes. But for me anyways, I started to turn the corner when I was able to ask this question: what does this now make possible? Or what new possibilities are now in front of us because of this change? And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when you get to ask that question, because it opens up a whole new world. It opens up a whole new wealth of possibilities, a whole new way for you to grow and change, and it allows God to work, right? It's really hard. I mean, God can do anything, but it's so much easier if we're on board, and it's really hard for us to be on board if we're listening to other people or our own emotions more than we're listening to Him.
It's tough to receive God's new assignment when you're still emotionally attached to your old assignment. It's tough to receive. It's tough to be open to. It's tough to see. It's tough to hear. It's tough to perceive God's new assignment for your life when you're still emotionally, mentally attached to whatever it is God's trying to remove you on from. So realize, man, that the emotional growth journey, while challenging, while difficult, while in some cases slow, is so worth it. The emotional freedom that is available for everybody it's real, and it's powerful, and it's intoxicating in an emotionally healthy way. It's like oxygen. What happens is we get used to operating with dysfunction.
Yeah.
We get used to it. It's the functioning alcoholic. In this case, it's the functioning low EQ person that's walking around hurting themselves and those around them because they're not aware of or willing to deal with those emotional issues. One of my buddies, episode 59, Daniel Hagedorn, when we did a episode on how to have an emotionally healthy family, episode 59, he said, if you don't deal with your emotional issues, your children and your spouse will, and your colleagues and your coworkers and your team and your company will have to deal with your emotional issues if you don't deal with them. So I just want to encourage you, it is so worth it. I'm so thankful that we blew it all up and started over at 45, because while again, for many, it may not look like, wow, these guys made good decisions. I am so thankful we've made the decisions that we have over the past few years to get our emotional healing and to become emotionally healthier. Not that we've arrived by any stretch, but that 3 to 4 years into this journey now, because it has impacted, and I'm telling you, every single area of our life now. And now I can receive God's direction and calling and blessings and challenges with a perspective that I've never been able to before, because I'm emotionally healthier.
And for us, we are at a place where we very much, like, we have seen in many different aspects of the entrepreneurial world where people achieve amazing things because they're operating out of their emotional dysfunction, right? Because they're running from something. And so, but we put them up on a pedestal and we say, look how great they are. Look at all the things that they achieved, when the reason they're there is for a very unhealthy reason, emotionally unhealthy reason. And then obviously the same thing can be true for a lot of people who never achieve anything. They probably are not achieving anything because of some emotionally unhealthy reason. So for where we're at now is we're really challenging ourselves. Okay, for each thing that we're doing, like this EQ, we had a big discussion today, EQ for entrepreneurs. What do we want to do with it in 2021? And the underlying premise, the foundation is we want to operate from a healthy place. We want to do things from a healthy perspective and not fall back into some of these emotionally unhealthy reasons for why we were hustling or why we were doing this or why we wanted to achieve these certain things. And I'm just telling you, it's taking a lot of concerted effort, because we're taking the time to really look at our why, to really look at, okay, well, what's driving that? What's driving us here? And making sure that as we continue to move forward and win and achieve and grow, that we're staying in a healthy place, that we're staying first and foremost where God wants us, but secondly, that we're not doing it for unhealthy reasons. And that's a huge challenge to all of you entrepreneurs out there, to all of you leaders, influencers. Are you operating from an emotionally healthy place? And I'll just tell you, for years, for those first 20 some years, we would have said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It wasn't until we started getting some self-awareness and really doing some emotional intelligence work that we began to realize, oh, maybe not quite so much. And we were able to start working on those things and healing them and changing them, which is why we're doing this podcast, because we feel like this message is life-changing. And I'm just telling you, the people that we've had already go through our course, that are in our membership, that's what they're telling us. They say, this is changing my life, because it's not just, this isn't one of those courses that we're going to say, oh, we're going to help you get to 6 figures in 2 years or whatever, 6 figures in 18 months. That's not what this is. This is, let's change you. Let's get you healthy. When the owner grows, the business can't help but grow as well. But we want you growing from a healthy place. We want you to be able to recognize what that looks like for you. And the beautiful thing is, emotional growth affects every area of your life for the better. Like we've talked about, your relationships with your family are going to get better. Your friendships will get better. Like, everything gets improved when you grow you from an emotional perspective.
And I want to hit on a huge countercultural point, or jump on it from what Kathy shared. Outcomes, results, KPIs, metrics, data, none of that is as important as the inner work to becoming emotionally healthy. Accomplishing all those things, become whatever your goals are, 2021, or becoming a zillionaire, saving poverty, or whatever your BHAGs are, big hairy audacious goals are. Accomplishing that stuff with the possibility of it killing you or hurting you and those around you because you're emotionally unhealthy is not worth it, in my opinion.
It's not our definition of success.
Yeah, again, in another, to her point, in episode 95, I interviewed one of my college classmates, TJ Brady, who's a screenwriter in Hollywood. He's done very famous TV shows and stuff that you guys would all recognize. And I asked him, what's the emotional health of Hollywood? And he said, man, he's like, dude, there's a lot He said, now I've had some great bosses and been around some great people. There's no doubt about it. But he said, dude, there is a tremendous amount of unhealthy emotional people in Hollywood. But guess what? They're zillionaires. Man, they drive the fancy cars, live in the big giant house, on pedestals, and so, on all the, TV shows, movies, tabloids, all that stuff. Is it worth it? Knowing that they're emotionally dysfunctional and emotionally jacked up, but they look good, they smell good, they dress right? It's, for me, man, that is just not the lifestyle. I want to be successful inside. I want to be healthy inside, and then let God take care of all the rest of the stuff. And whatever that looks like, whatever those KPIs are, and I just know that it'll be easier for me to do the work that God wants me to do if I'm emotionally healthy. Because then I can be spiritually healthy, then I can be physically healthy. But if I'm not emotionally healthy, man, at some point, your emotional health or lack thereof will catch up to you. Pain and bitterness that's not transformed will absolutely be transferred somewhere else in your life. It's your emotional unhealthiness will show up, will catch up to you. You can stuff and avoid right now, maybe fine, snapshot in time. At some point, it's going to catch up to you. And I'm telling you, that emotional work that you're doing is so worth it. It is so worth it. Give yourself time, give yourself patience, give yourself grace, give yourself space, but be intentional and consistent at your emotional growth journey. And remember, emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. So hope you got some good takeaways from why we blew it all up and started over at 45.